Guys, today I'm in Woodland Hills at the Cave of Munits to talk about how to survive a wildfire. And the reason I chose this location is because a few weeks ago, this whole area was an evacuation zone and there were flames licking the outside of this cave. You can actually see at the entrance of this cave, all the vegetation leading up to the little hill in front of the cave has been burned. An appropriate place to talk about tips to survive a wildfire. And in this particular case, we're talking about you're on foot. You're hiking, you're walking through a wooded area, possibly wilderness, miles, tens, hundreds of miles away from any civilization, any help. And all you have to depend on are the things that you have, the knowledge, the skills, and experience that you have. Tip number one is a directional tip. And this has two parts to it. The first one is you want to move in a perpendicular direction from the direction that the wind is blowing, because the fire is going to follow the path of the wind. So if the wind is blowing that way, the fire is going to move that way. So it seems intuitive that you would want to move away from the fire, but actually what you want to do is you want to move perpendicular to the direction of the wind. And the reason for that is so that you can outflank the fire as opposed to the fire outrunning you. And if the wind's blowing that direction, obviously you don't want to move into the wind, but you don't want to move downwind of a fire either. You want to move perpendicular to the wind in an attempt to outflank the fire. A second part of that directional avoidance of the fire would be, if at all possible, move downhill. The fire is going to want to naturally move uphill. Heat rises, the fire is going to travel up a hill. So if you have a choice to either go uphill or stay on a ridge or go downhill, you want to travel downhill away from the fire. Tip number two, and this might seem obvious to some people, if you can, you want to travel through an already burned area. There's nothing else to burn there. It's all ash and burned trees. It's safe to travel through that area because the fire isn't going to be able to move back through that area because it's already burned all the fuel. Tip number three, if you can, avoid going down into a canyon. You could get stuck down in a canyon with fire burning all around you with no way to get out, especially if you don't have ropes or anything like that. You may get ledged out, stuck in that canyon. Part of the reason you also want to avoid a canyon is they can funnel really hot air, smoky air through that canyon, and it could cause you to suffocate. Tip number four, you can avoid a wildfire by going in a large body of water, such as a pond, a lake, even sometimes a swimming pool. A large body of water where there's nothing close enough that's going to fall on top of you. In other words, you want to be far enough from the height of a tree so that if a tree burns and then falls over, you don't want to be within striking distance of that tree. So far enough away from objects that could potentially fall on top of you, and you're safe in the water. Probably more ideal to choose something that's not super deep. So a shallow pond, but a wide pond would probably be the most ideal. And then again, you're going to want to wait until all that fuel, trees, brush around that pond have burned up before you even think about traveling out of that situation. The fifth and final tip is similar to that water avoidance technique, and that is what they call going to ground. Now, this is a very last-ditch effort in an attempt to survive a wildfire. There's many different ways. You could find shelter in a cave. Perfect example, Cave of Munits. You've got ventilation out the top. There's not a lot of fuel around here. There's a few little shrubs and stuff like that, but I would be willing to bet you'd be pretty safe in a cave, a giant cave like this. So going to ground, a cave, some other type of shelter, a boulder, grotto, something like that. And very last ditch effort is digging a hole in the dirt. And you want to try to avoid any fuel, any grass, anything that is going to burn. So like a dirt field, a sandy area. So you want to dig a hole, lie face down in that hole, and cover yourself with the dirt or the sand or even rocks, small pebbles, whatever you can, as long as it's non-flammable. Again, going to ground is considered your last option, where you can't outrun the fire, you can't outflank the fire, you can't find any water, and you have no choice but to go to ground. As fast as you can, dig a hole in non-flammable area, cover yourself face down in the hole with non-flammable material, and that's going to ground. I hope that none of you ever find yourself in a situation where you're faced with escaping a wildfire, but I hope that if you do, you're armed with these tips and you make it out alive. Share this video with someone who you think could benefit from these tips. And the best way to stay safe from a wildfire is to avoid wildfires altogether. Follow fire restrictions in your area. Always check for camping stove, campfire, barbecue, any type of fire restrictions. Whenever you go camping, hiking, observe those restrictions. Please, if you're a smoker, mind your cigarette butts, put them out appropriately. It only takes one spark in this huge tinderbox, especially in Southern California. So stay safe, get out there, find your adventure, and be infamous.
Infamous.